Okay, so I called it Physical Literacy 101. I don't know if it's 101 or not. I know that it's not a new word probably to anybody on the call, but maybe where you are in your journey of physical literacy may be new. And then if nothing else, if you are kind of aficionado at physical literacy, maybe some of the things we'll talk about today will have you look at it maybe from a different lens. And even I know that physical literacy, the concept of physical literacy is relatively new in North America. Around the 2012-13 was kind of the time where one of our, I'll say our Canadian pioneers in physical literacy, Dr. Dean Creelars out of Manitoba, was kind of the person that kind of took it by the horns, if you will, or the reins for us in Canada. And I was introduced to it in, actually, before 2013. 2006 is when I was introduced to it. And so 2003 would have been around the time that he started doing that work. So I'm going to go off of a couple things here and just ask you if you wouldn't mind, firstly, in the chat, whatever comes to your mind when you hear physical literacy, there's no wrong answer. Could you just write down either words or a statement? I'll only give you about 30 seconds, but just go. What do you think physical literacy is, or what does it mean to you? All right, Apple Schools team, I don't know why, but I'm not getting anything on there. Would you want any of you mind just kind of throwing out what's not refreshing? Oh, there we go. Perfect. Competence, body awareness, students who have the cognitive, social, emotional skills to be confident. Awesome. Okay, so well, there we go. Ability to do things we want to be able to do for lifelong active learning. Yay, Kathy. All right, so like I said, no wrong answers there, but now we're going to kind of expand on that. So by definition, I'm going to, I know I'm going to show the video. I should have actually reordered this because by definition, oh my goodness. This is a little video, so it's 2 minutes, 2 minutes and 3 seconds from Australia. So it kind of gives an overview if you are more of a visual or auditory. So I'll let you just watch this here. And then we'll jump in.
Australians love their sport and have a long history of sporting success. But we're still falling behind the world in health and fitness because we've turned into a nation of watchers. We watch sport, but not enough of us play. We move and play less, and it's impacting more than just our waistlines. It's impacting our physical literacy. What's physical literacy? It's more than just the physical skills that help us move. It's the knowledge, behaviors, and confidence that motivates us to live active lives. Our physical literacy impacts how we think and process information, our attitudes, emotions, and feelings, and how we interact with others when being physically active. So it's more than just exercise? That's right. Physical literacy is about developing our whole self, not just the physical skills like running, jumping, and throwing. Look, most of us know it's important to be active. The real problem is knowing where to start and having the confidence and motivation to maintain an active lifestyle because we know it's good for us. Isn't this message just for lazy people? No, it's for everyone. Increasing your knowledge and physical skills helps you develop the confidence to solve problems and gives you motivation to take action. So, what do we do? Start by thinking about what you can do to improve your physical literacy and that of your kids. Help them develop their movement skills like running, jumping, throwing, and swimming. Let them play and learn every day. Physical literacy leads to better performance in the classroom, greater motivation, and stronger social connections. And it doesn't stop once you finish school. It influences how we incorporate activity at home, at work, and socially. By developing physical literacy and making daily physical activity the norm, we can set ourselves and our children up for active, healthy, and fulfilling lives. For more information, go to sportaus.gov.au.
All right, so I'm just going to get out of here. Go back to his. recording here. Sorry, the recording bar right in the middle of where my presentation is in the way. Let me just go like this. Okay. Back to here. All right, so I was thinking again about something after watching the video yesterday with the group, and the one thing I really like about that is that there's lots out there, and obviously, and even the definition of physical literacy went around and around, if you will, in that first, I'll say about 5-6 years, and everyone wanted to kind of own the definition, if you will. So really, you're going to hear me later on talk about something being a way, not the way, and I would say that about physical literacy as well, as far as the actual definition goes. The piece of that video that I feel is missing is, if you noticed, maybe some of you did right off the hop, everybody in that video is very able-bodied, and it talks about skills like running, jumping, throwing, which is fundamental movement skills, but doesn't address some of our inclusion and our disabilities, whether they be physical or cognitive, or anything like that. So I just wanted to bring that up to say that I'm very cognizant of that, but this was still one of the best ones that was out there as far as encompassing the message and being hopefully the lifelong learning, and that it's more than just in school. Okay, so I asked the question yesterday, so I'm going to go, and I just noticed here, I'm like, Heather, I'm going to come back to this because for some reason I reordered. So here's a definition. If you're more of a kind of, if you want to, I'll just let you read it for a second. So back in 2014, after it kind of being the concept of physical literacy on the I'll say the international map for about 10 years at that time. This is the International Physical Literacy Association came out with this definition, and you'll see words that were in the chat: motivation, confidence, physical knowledge, and understanding, which are all those kind of key concepts that you've cited in the chat, as well as you would know if you've heard the word before. So now a few years ago, PHE Canada was Physical Health Education Canada, which is kind of our governing body of all of our, like our ATA, HPEC, Health and Phys Ed Education Council, Specialist Council of ATA. PHE Canada is kind of our governing body. And this is the definition they had come up with. So you see very similar, talking about that development of those things like knowledge, skills, and attitudes. So all very similar in words, if you will. Okay. So again, more of I'll just pinpoint here the words that are bolded, and that's the understanding, the communicating, the applying, the analyzing. And we know that as educators, those are the things we want kids to be able to do, demonstrating. And then the other one there is healthy, active choices. So I'm going to go back and say, I apologize, they shouldn't have been ordered this way, but I wanted to just kind of start with this one here. So when we talk about literacies, we know, and I said this yesterday, and I know if your administrators on the call, I kind of put Kathy on the spot here, but I know as a fellow administrator, literacy and numeracy obviously are very important, and then the foundation of what we do in schools. At the end of the day, though, I would argue that physical literacy, much like music literacy, art literacy, whatever you want to call them, but the importance of physical literacy and what we do and the skills that we're teaching kids to be active for life obviously far exceed the walls of our schools, much like literacy and numeracy do. So I would love to see, and I shared with the group yesterday around the Phys Ed HPEC table. For years, I've been on that committee for 25 of my 26 years, and we've often joked tongue in cheek about maybe the need for a PAT or a diploma in Phys Ed to kind of give it the grit or the same kind of teeth, if you will, that literacy and numeracy get in terms of funding and even support from parents. In all my years of teaching in the classroom, I loved when parents actually came to see me, not for social studies that I also taught over the years, or not when I was teaching grade 4 or grade 6, for literally the literacy and numeracy, but for Phys Ed and what we were doing in Phys Ed, and have those questions. And when they did, I always welcomed them. They were few and far between, but I wish that we had more phone calls and more people asking about what we're doing or not doing maybe. And a lot of it is our history or our experiences that we've had in a subject like Phys Ed, and thinking that that's what physical literacy is because it has that word physical. And so while that's obviously very important, the physical piece, it's not the only thing. Oh, sorry, not sure what happened there. Oh my goodness, what happened to my screen here, team? Sorry. Okay, back at it. Good. Okay. All right. This is a graphic that I love that I've used for years now. I got very early on when I went back to consulting, and it's just a good way of kind of showing kind of what I was talking about. So in literacy, we think about the ABCs, numeracy, the 1, 2, 3s, in music, the do, re, mi's, and then physical literacy. And we talk about our movement vocabulary, which is our fundamental movement skills, and our sequences and our tasks. And wouldn't it be great to see? And at the bottom, those pictures across the bottom are kind of that highest level, which, the mastery, if we will, to strive to, or what things have come as a result of these literacies. So very, very important, obviously. And I would say it would just be awesome to see physical literacy up there with the importance that it is. And like I said, we all know it's much like anything in the health industry. Like we know that movement is good for us for all sorts of reasons. But yet, just like we know smoking is bad for us, yet people still smoke. We know movement is good for us, but yet people still, maybe are unable to move or choose not to, or what have you. So just something to kind of think about. So again, the definitions are those out of whack. All right, so Dean Dudley, he was actually our keynote speaker at HPEC, which was just this past weekend here in Sherwood Park. And I was fortunate enough to meet him back in 2016, and then started working with him in 2017, and we've just kept in touch. My first year back in 2017, we brought him into Alberta, and he did a few days here with Edmonton Public, Edmonton Catholic, and St. Albert Catholic. And I love this visual. I talked about it yesterday, and then I found it to put it in here. He equates kind of his work, and he's done work at the UNESCO level, and he does a lot, obviously, in Australia, but now around the world. And he said if you want more information, some of his work now, he's moving more into the character education piece, and that kind of where that fits in physical literacy. So he has taken the concept of physical literacy, and this is the construct that he talks about, equates it to like those little Russian dolls. And I know yesterday, right before we left, Lauren, you put what they were called in the chat, and I don't know how to say that, but if anyone knows the little stacking dolls, she's going to put it again, I bet, that you put one inside the other, inside the other, inside the other, and bigger to smaller. That's kind of the analogy he uses for physical literacy. So while there's no question that the physical part needs to be there, just like in physical education, the physical has to be there, the education piece has to be there for it truly to be a quality physical education program. We're not just rolling the ball out, etc., which I'll come back to after. So this is his visual, if you will, and he talks about, if you notice the movement competencies at the top there, that would be the physical skills. So while they're important, absolutely, then you say the next layer of that would be that whole rules and tactic. That's the cognitive. So that's the kind of the why and the how that we're doing what we're doing, and those skills, which then moves into that motivation and behavioral part of it, which is gets into that more of the affective piece of it, the psychological, and then into the last one, which is the biggest of the dolls, if you will, and the biggest of these circles is the personal and social attributes to movement. That's that motivation, why we actually continue to do it, to be lifelong. I said yesterday, and I don't have it on a slide here, but something that resonated with me way back in like 2006, when Dean Creelars talked about it, was this whole thing that the concept of physical literacy really is cradle to grave. It's not. So I asked the question yesterday to the group, how many of you would think or say that physical literacy is physical education? And so you can look at it either way. So I would say yes to both. So phys ed is physical literacy, and is physical literacy phys ed? Yes. But at the end of the day, the concept of physical literacy is far exceeds physical education, because physical education happens in the in the confines of school, if you will, when the kids are being educated, much like literacy and numeracy. But much like literacy and numeracy, they exceed the rest of their life. Same with physical literacy. And that's why we talk about the concept of cradle to grave. When babies are born, how we, when the doctors do the APGAR test right off the hop from the second they come out, they're looking for the noise, if you will. So very often they're crying or they're spitting or whatever they're doing. And then movement. If you think about literally, if they're not moving or making those little sounds, right away they're making sure that they do. And so I just think it's a really great way to just remember physical literacy, that it's cradle to grave. Not we want people to be. My mother-in-law turns 84 today, and COVID unfortunately did a lot of people wrong, but it did my in-laws dirty, as we say. But they are, up until COVID, they were square dancing 2 days a week, bowling 1 day a week, and then they walk every day. They still do that now, but just for other health reasons stuff, they are unable to do some of those other things. But that's being physically literate. Gardening, being able to walk to and from the mailbox, obviously a lot slower pace. I'm sorry, I don't know why this keeps popping up here. Okay, anyway, sorry. So building off of this here, These are the 4 domains. And again, I added this from yesterday, which you may have heard. So just different if semantics. At the end of the day, we'll get more into the meat of physical literacy and what that looks like in the delivery. But whatever words we're using, as long as we're on the same page, that it kind of falls under these, whether it's these 4 here, these concept, the part of the concept, strategies, if you will, or the domains, or through the definition, you've seen these words come up before. Okay, and I said this is all in. You'll have this presentation, so I know I'm looking through it fast, but I mentioned this before, and I'll say it again here. So when we think about activities, games, even the definition, they're just a way, not the way. And I think that's something that was a huge piece for me when I went back to consulting the second time, so now 9 years ago, about this. And so we need to move away from the days where, and again, I have been very lucky in my life to be surrounded by sport and play a lot of sport at high level. I still ref at the college level for basketball. I coached from littles all the way up to high school. Had some very successful teams in every sport you can think of. We're a very active family, etc. But at the end of the day, the way I teach, and kids always say this to me, Mr. Stewart, you teach way different than you coach. And I say, yeah, I do, because at the end of the day, by the time we get to coaching, for the most part, even if they're community programs where we want everyone to be involved, it's still more specific, if you will, sports specific, etc. And whereas education is a right, everyone has the right to education. Everyone has the right to physical education and to be taught those skills. Whereas it's more of a privilege to be on these teams because very often then it comes with costs, etc. Even if the costs are covered or subsidized, it's still something where there's a next layer of that. So it's not the same as a phys ed class. So I said, yeah, I do teach differently than I coach because the expectations are, I still have high expectations in my phys ed classes and on my teams, but they look a little different because we're sport specific as opposed to in a phys ed class. So this is just a little example of it's called beach blanket volleyball, really simple, and the website where it's from, PE Central. But it was just to kind of demonstrate that why do we have to play volleyball with a net that happens to be 6 or 7 feet tall with a white touch car volleyball? Why can't the net be lower? Why can't the net be a bench? Why does there even have to be a net? And I'm talking about when we're teaching the kids these skills. Might those kids go on to play? And do we want maybe opportunities as young adults to play in Edmonton Sport and Social Club? Absolutely, that's great. And that would be with a white touch car volleyball 6-a-side. There's a place for that, 100%. Again, if you know me, I'm a very competitive person, but there's time and place for all of those kinds of things. So we just need to make space for all of them. Okay. These are from Canada Sport for Life. And so you may have seen this graphic before. I won't spend too much time on here, but at the end of the day, there's those words again, the physical competence, the motivation, the confidence. And we just want to break down in the next couple slides here, the more specific words. So confidence could, would, should look like the words on the side. When kids truly feel included, when there's appropriate success and failure. We're not saying in physical literacy that we need to have everybody get the participation ribbon and there's no competition and there's never a winner. That's not what we're saying at all. When I come into the kind of the quality, the 5 standards for a quality program, you'll see what I mean by that, because we really do need to make sure that we're offering, much like any other subject in a classroom, we wouldn't have a book and all the kids are expected to read that same book. Or even if we did choose a book that all the kids are reading, there would be different levels scaffolded within that. Very similar in physical literacy and in our phys ed classes, that needs to happen. Okay, the motivation piece. So what is that desire? So the desire for somebody to be active who maybe has cerebral palsy, or maybe someone who's in a wheelchair, or maybe somebody even who has a temporary. I've got a student I'm thinking of yesterday whose arm is in a cast, and we have a dance showcase on Tuesday, and she really wants to be a part of it, but she's still in so much pain. Like it just happened 3 days ago, so she physically can't. So what are we going to do to make her still be a part of it? So she'll still go to the performance, but we have to retweak that, if that makes sense. But she has a desire to do those things. So what will that look like? Okay. And then I can statements, which again, a lot of educators, you would be familiar with those things, but this is kind of what we would love to see happen at the end of the day. Physical literacy is the I can, I believe, I want. So if I can do something, I believe in myself, I have that confidence, and therefore I want to continue doing it, or I want to continue to get better, or I want to continue to the next level of whatever that is for me, where I'm at individually. Okay, so this next part, again, I know that looks like a lot on there. It's probably very difficult to see. So what we did, so on HPEC, for this last year, we've been kind of honing in on the new PEW curriculum, so the physical education wellness curriculum, and where we're at with the ABCDs, recognizing that we have PEW K-6, in the cusp, but in the actual outcomes, we see parts of physical literacy and drawing that out more, if you will. So I'm going to show you on the next couple of slides here, and then at the end of the slide, I put in the presentation that I did last week at our pre-conference. It was a 3-hour session where we took a bunch of activities and married, if you will, the PEW and the ABCDs of movement together into all the activities. And I'll show you one here in a second, just for our teachers, even though a lot of the teachers that were at the session at GETCA this year, as well as Shaping the Future in January, and then pre-conference just last year, but just to start having those conversations and really putting the words out there for the students so they know, and I'll come back to that. Wellness, again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on here, especially with the audience. Speaking to the converted here, we've seen the wellness wheel before. There's lots of dimensions there. There's 8 there. Some would argue there's more, less, what have you. At the end of the day, the point is that these all help to, some of the words literally intellectual, the social, etc. They are right in there as far as the domains of physical literacy. This next one is a bit of a hot mess. I said this yesterday, so it's more just to show that when we're doing much like anything, if we're in a phys ed class and we're using the ABCDs of movement and it's a C day where I am evaluating on, let's say, fair play, that's not to say that we don't recognize that if we're playing a game of something, there's still skills happening, there's still benefits of health happening, there's still our D, do it daily, like our safety, our effort, etc. happening. But when we are naming for the students to be able to understand what they're being marked and evaluated on, that's so important. And so this is just to show the intersections of when we're doing any activity. It's not just an outcome that's being covered. It's usually the intersection of many, and you kind of get this. Okay. I asked the question yesterday, and instead of just for time wise, I want to be able to get to a bit more grit, if you will. Financial literacy, I said it was the elephant on this slide that we addressed yesterday as to why it's here. And I asked the question, and then someone came on to say why that's in wellness. Maybe some of you on the call are kind of thinking, yeah, like why is that in the wellness curriculum or in physical education? And so in a nutshell, this went round and round around the table. I was very lucky to be part of the writing team that did the curriculum K-12 before the UCP came in and kind of changed some things. But foundationally, everything that we worked hard at for those first 4 years is still reflected here. Financial literacy was one of those ones that was a hot topic between us and math, as far as everyone agrees that it's important that we teach students about financial literacy, but where it landed was kind of the sticking or the bugaboo around both curriculum groups. And so why it landed in wellness or in the PEW curriculum in a nutshell is that when someone is financially literate, much like literacy, numeracy, physical literacy, etc., being able to make those decisions, and much like we do in, I said, physical literacy, it's about balance. And so if you're able to balance the books, if you will, this is really simplistic, then you can make those choices better and have access to these resources, or you can maybe choose to have a gym membership or play on a team or what have you. So it's just that whole, I think Alana said yesterday, sadly, but at the same time, money makes the world go round to be able to offer some of these things that we know. I could go into all the funding and stuff like that. That's not what I want to get into, but hopefully you understand what that means. If you have any questions or comments, you can put it in the chat, but I just don't want to spend too much time, because sometimes I did a session one time that financial literacy really could have derailed what we were trying to do. So I just don't want that to happen. Okay, so it's there. We understand whether we agree with it or not. Maybe like in other things we agree with or not. We need to make the best of it and try to understand it for what it is. Okay, so this. In 2015, again, Dr. Dean Dudley, he did a report for UNESCO, was part of it, called the Kazan report. You can look it up, it's right there for you. But he basically said that equality, and then he said education program. So he was speaking specifically about physical education. That's why it's in the brackets there like that. I would argue that anything that we do in education, if we were to think about these 5 words and try to really truly ensure that they're embedded in what we're doing, we're in a pretty good space. So in terms of physical education, and now again, going back to that broader concept of physical literacy, if our programs are varied and they're frequent, if they're meaningful, challenging, inclusive, then like I said, we're doing a pretty good job. And then to go now further to that, what does that actually look like? For it to be varied is varied for everyone that is in front of us. So not just teaching something like phys ed where we often get the bad rap for throwing the ball out. We're always just playing dodgeball. We're always just at the park. We're always, those kinds of things that may have happened, or maybe you see that happen in your schools or you've heard of. There's a time and a place for those things, and there's a time and a place for things like dodgeball. Dodgeball gets a really bad rap, just like tag does. But there's a lot of really good skills that can be taught through a game of dodgeball. It's just that we really shouldn't be doing it all year long. And if we're not changing it up from having 5 or 6 balls and the same 3 or 4 students always have all of those balls, and they're the ones that are kind of domineering that game, or if we're not giving other kids opportunities to be included, then we really need to kind of look at how we're offering a game like a dodgeball game. So when we talk about this again, we don't want to make it so that everybody gets the participation ribbon, or doing something where it's I'll say for like dumbing down, so that we're never challenging the kids who need to be challenged. So we have to make sure we understand our kids, and that is something as educators we do well. So what does that look like for different students in our classes? And so I did say yesterday too, and I forgot so far today. I hope that none of these slides, the intent is not ever to insult any of your intelligence that are on this call, but just to really bring some things to the forefront. And kind of at the point too in my career and doing this for a long time and seeing a lot of things that I guess the word I want to say more is being intentional. And so there's the session that I just did this past Thursday. There was there's 48 teachers that were there for our pre-conference. And so they came through, and some of these teachers I've known for most of my career. And I think it speaks volumes. One of them is a high school teacher in Edmonton Public and is a friend of mine. I would call her a friend. Don't see her often, but I would call her a friend. And she sent me a lovely email on Sunday just to talk about the fact that, and I said that to them too, about not insulting any of their intelligence, because some of them are teaching longer than me and in different circumstances, etc. They're in the trenches right now, and I'm not. But her words just again resonated with me. She just said, I just said, looking at it from a different lens, so that maybe something we've been doing for a long time, can we tweak that to ensure these things are happening, to really get at those other domains of physical literacy, not just the physical. And she thanked me for that. And I'm not saying me, but just the deliberate of it, because the whole session was called intentional activities. So choosing activities and putting kids in situations intentionally to set them up for success, for everybody up for success, not just for the cream of the crop, if you will, to raise to that. So any questions? I know I'm talking away here. I'm trying to look over there to see if nothing's flagging here, but okay. All right, so I'm going to show you this. So this goes back to what I was saying. I was playing with a little thing on my finger and I sent it flying. Oh, it's way over there now. One of those little ring things on my finger, like a little fidget, and it's on the other side of the desk. So never mind, I'll play with somebody else. So this is what we did. So back to that one with the pew on there with all the pew outcomes. Now we tried to, again, marry the ABCDs and the pew. So this is just a blank template that, again, you'll have access to, just to really have those. And you see across the top, I very deliberately put varied, frequent, meaningful, challenging, and inclusive. So even though the words physical literacy are not on this template, the idea, the concepts or the domains of it certainly are. And so we're just trying to show the correlation between the ABCDs of movement, which is now 22 years old, 23 years old, because we're 24, and now with the pew, and how they are a lot of, it's kind of really has stand the test of time, which is really nice to see. And then obviously here how we can put the two together. Okay, so this next one, this is actually a game that I put into the slide that we did last Thursday, and then here it is for you here. So the game is called Switch. Some of you may or may have played it or not played it before. You use a 4-square kind of setup. I'll just go to the diagram for you here. So whether or not this is on, you have 4-square at your schools, out on your tarmac, or you do this, I more often than not actually do it with poly spots or painter's tape, wherever it is. So at my high school that I left before I went back to consulting, it warms my heart. My husband's the principal there now, but it warms my heart when I go in to see that there are actually still 4-square templates like this actually in their hallway. We're a school of one gym, one high school with one gym, and the spaces are limited and it's growing, which is an awesome problem to have. But we're very often out in the hallway that was just off to the off from the gym. And so we put these down with painter tape, and it said it warms my heart that they redo them every year and they use them quite often, which is great. So basically what this is in a nutshell, the game switch is explained here, how to play it. It's kind of the principle of dodging. And so you're moving spaces back and forth, you're switching with somebody else. But the reason I put it in here is just to show you what the handout will look like when you get it, kind of see. So here's the outcomes that could be covered. Like I said, if you were playing this game, whether you're using Pew or whether you're using the ABCDs of movement, and you recognize what I talked about before, from the ABCDs of movement that hopefully we're all very familiar with, you can see that right off the hop, there's 6 outcomes and within those 6, there could actually be even more of the specific outcomes. And within Pew, there's the 4 in the movement skills and the active living. So those are things that you can see a very simple game right off the hop has lots of outcomes that's being covered. And then as the educators, then we choose which one we're actually going to assess and evaluate on. I was sharing with the group yesterday, my kids that I had at Mother Margaret Mary before I left there, there's 161 of them, and I had the great fortune of teaching over 140 of them from grade 7 that they were at the school I was at before, and then they came over to Mother Margaret Mary. So this group are very near and dear to my heart. And they were at a point where I would say to them, okay, today's a C day on fair play, or today is a D day on safety, or today is a personal challenge day, or whatever. And then we would go about our business. And if I didn't, I had some students, Noah, who is on me all the time, like, Mr. Richard, what are we being evaluated on today? Which just said was awesome. That accountability for me, but also for them to understand this in a student way, not to go through the whole specific outcome, but to really, I'll say embrace, and maybe sound a little cheesy, but to really embrace what we were doing and to be cognizant, of the outcomes that we're covering. I think is really important. And yes, that's a high school, but I did, as a phys ed consultant, when I go in, I would say to the kids, even if they didn't necessarily know them specifically, I'd say, this is what we're doing today, and this is what, if I'm evaluating you, it would be on this. Okay, so that's what the document looks like. There's links in all of the document as to where they come from, so you can look at, this is a little YouTube video that shows it. Okay, I'm going to go past this one. This is, again, more from Sport for Life, but this is just about the physical skills, recognizing that if you can do these things, which is run, jump, throw, or not, the bottom is on jump, but you swim as an example, but these things will then lead you into the more of the skill sport ones on the right-hand side, which is great, but again, just another visual. There's lots of stuff out there if you need stuff, if you will, in terms of support or advocacy for physical literacy. And I just tried to really hone in on, other than that Australian video I showed you, all of the resources, the websites that I've linked at the end are all Canadian, except for, like I said, the Australian sport model, which is a great, Australian Sport Commission, which is a great resource as well. When we were writing the curriculum, we cited them several times because they're ahead of us by about a decade in terms of their work in physical literacy. So there's some great stuff there. So we've kind of already talked about these words here. Moving along, again, fundamental movement skills. This is sometimes where I know when I first came back to consulting for Edmonton Catholic, this is where the physical literacy piece, a lot of people would stop with the physical. So the fundamental movement skills are obviously, there are building blocks of movement, but they're just one of the 4 domains. And so super important, and going back to like what I said before, these are lifelong skills. So whatever that looks like for us, sometimes things like injuries, age, having children, there's things that kind of get in our way, if you will, good, bad, or otherwise, that we have to adapt to. So when we have the foundation of fundamental movement skills, even though sometimes we have injuries, or sometimes, well, we all age, and that looks different, we still have that base for it. And I think that's super important. And the more students understand this, the better it is for them. And the example I shared yesterday, when we get into things like dance, I always ask students, literally from kindergarten up, why they think that dance is something that we have in curriculum all across North America, and I'd probably say in all first world countries, why do they think government puts dance in curriculum? And I get answers from everything from because they don't like us or they're dumb to, well, I shared yesterday, one of a grade 6 boy I had a number of years ago said to me, that's how I get the ladies. I said, okay, well, look at you, player. And but further to that, though, I said, what does that mean? And that's that whole social aspect, right? And so, and we think of the cultural, the stories that get passed along with dance and how important it really is. So um, when kids think dance, sometimes right away they think, and this is society, just like when we think hockey, we think NHL. When we think dance, we think tap, jazz, ballet. Like you have to be this dancer. Where when we talk about educational dance or educational types of gymnastics, it really we bring that down. But again, to challenge everybody, whether they are dancers in the class or not, but to be movement. And when the best example I give for functional fitness of why we do dance is things like balance. So 1 foot. And even though it's just for a split second, every time we go up a stair, that's balancing, that's functional fitness. And so we as able-bodied people take those things for granted. I know time and time again, I think when I see someone who, might have a cast on or who's in a wheelchair or who is using assistance for walking, how really truly lucky we are. But then where do we find space for those people as well? And how do we truly make sure that they are have a space and they are included? Okay, inclusion does not mean if someone, let's say, is in a wheelchair, that they're just in the gym. Um, that's, or I should say that that's inclusion, but that's not necessarily engagement. And I think the two are very different. I can say in my, I'll say my 26 years, but I'm going to say in my 20 years in the actual gymnasium teaching kids K to 12, that more often than not, students that I had that would have some kind of visible physical disability, they could do a lot more than they were given credit for. And I shared yesterday a different story about this young man that I had with cerebral palsy, who I had from grade 7 to grade 11, took phys ed 20. He fought hard not to have his EA in phys ed with him. And I think that speaks volumes to him. He was very, very strong. He was a very high functioning person with cerebral palsy, but it was really neat to see him come to phys ed class. He would come with his helmet on, and again, these kids I had them for so long that they were a great group of students in terms of tolerance and understanding. But there was things that he wanted to prove to himself that he could do. He wanted to run the 100 meter, and I will never forget that at our grade 9 track and field. Obviously, run for him looked very different than a traditional run 100 meter where they're coming in, 12, 15, 20 seconds, and he's coming in, closer to 2 minutes. But talk about that whole motivation and for everybody there, and the whole school was on their feet and stopped what everyone was doing to watch him come over the finish line. That's why we do what we do. And for him, it was not it was his choice. It was not something anyone made him do, but those are those kinds of things we kind of go, okay, yeah. And that's truly what inclusion is. So anyway, sorry, that's a little story. And then the other part of that whole thing is what this looks like. So not just doing having these fundamental movement skills, but in different things, indoors, outdoors. We know in the glorious place we live in, I truly do mean that, but sometimes I think, why do we live here? We can have 4 seasons in one day. And we know that we can go from a recess time with something and then very different to a phys ed class outside. But I think it's very important that we as in school offer these opportunities, but also as human beings have them. So what that would look like, whether on the ground, in water, ice or snow, and then air is just being obviously off of the ground. So it doesn't mean dropping out of a plane or anything, but what would that look like when they're propelled off of the ground? Okay. Again, PHE Canada just has a lot of really good resources out there. This just happened to fit into a really nice acronym of education and what that looks like. So you can see it down along the side. There's some of the words we've already talked about, but not specifically, but where they would fit into those 4 domains of social, cognitive, the physical, domains. And I think the one that sticks out and why I put this slide in here is the character one. And that's kind of that next piece now that we've been kind of living, breathing, talking, if you will, physical literacy. Character education is now the work that Dean Dudley, and part of why we had him come back into as our keynote speaker, because that's actually that whole character education piece sits really nicely in the Pew curriculum as well. So that's kind of just another visual I thought I'd put in here. Okay, so what I'm gonna ask you to do, we've been sitting for a while and I've been talking for a while, I apologize. But if you could just stand, because if you don't want to stand, if you're unable to stand, that's okay too, but just stand up for a second. This is just one of the things I started with, just to kind of demonstrate how easy and how important it is to change things up in terms of grouping kids or for activities, partners, whether you're a facilitator with kids or whatever. So I'm gonna ask you if you wouldn't mind, I'm just gonna sit because I'm not at a standing desk, I'll stay sitting, but with your hands, if you could just take them, or your arms actually, and cross them over. If you look down and see which arm is on top, if we were together in person, I would ask you to go and find a person with the same arm on top. Now, obviously, if the students are younger, etc., you might have to help them with the left, right. If it's kind of a visual for them, that's fine too. And at the end of the day, like I said, all of these things are not so much about its opportunity, because you might see, if let's say that I really, really want to be with Lauren and I see that her other arm is on top, you might see kids do this and switch over. That's cheating. And so it's a really teachable moment to talk about why we did this, because I'll give you another one. Stand on one foot, or put one foot, if you're sitting, put one foot in the air. Okay, so look down, whatever foot that you're on. If people were able to, I'd ask you to hop and find a new partner. So what this does really quickly, you can put your foot down. I always have to say that because I didn't realize, again, just last Thursday doing that, I kept on talking and people were standing on one foot for a good, 30 seconds, and they're looking at me and they're kind of doing the old balance. And I'm like, oh, sorry, put your foot down. But good students, I didn't tell them to put their foot down, so they didn't. So put your foot down. But the thing with this is that these are things where I can look very easily now and see if we have even numbers, odd numbers, if I need if I need partners, or if I need, two groups, I can say, okay, put your foot down. And now with that partner, the person who has the lightest hair color between the two of you, you come to this side, you come to this side, things like that. Okay, one more, just take your hands and cross them over like this. And now you're going to see what thumb is on top. And again, I might say, go find someone, go. And then I always say things like, it can't be someone you've been with before. It can't be someone on either side of you, what have you. Okay, so you can come sit down. And while you're sitting, I know the group, the Apple School people heard me say this yesterday, but one of my favorite ones to do is look at the bottom of your shoe for the color or the tread. And once you see what that is, you'd go and find someone, you'd go and find your soulmate. See, so cute. I love that one. I learned that one years ago. But anyways, okay, somebody, please humor me. Put your camera on if you are okay with that, or at least put your speaker on and tell us what do those things, can't be an Apple School person, what do those things all have in common? So when I asked you to put your thumb, put your arm, stand on one foot, even the color or the whatever your shoe, what do those things have in common? Anybody? Just for time, I'll tell you. Do you have control over those things? No. So subconsciously, when I
Hi,
say,
we're here from Onaway Elementary. We have an idea. I don't know, what was it? What do they all have in common? Dominance, instinct, crossbody, and variety.
ooh la la, well done, Onaway. That's awesome. All awesome. Yes. So at the end of the day, the reason I said what I love about those ones is that they're subconscious in the sense, or instinct, someone said, you don't have control of it. So no, unless I physically think about it, when I just do it, and I honestly had done this hundreds of times, when I put mine together, I'm going to say probably 10 out of 10 times, my left finger's on top. Now, if I had to think about it, like, it feels odd for me to go, okay, now that I just told you that, I'm going to put my right finger. That feels odd to me. Okay. So where I'm going with that is that's what my brain did by instinct or subconsciously. But what that does is it puts everyone on an even playing field. So even though some people might then choose to switch their fingers, if you will, to cheat to be with who they want to be with, the point is when we put kids in these situations, or people in these situations that they have no control over, then it puts everybody out there. So now we're going to be with different people. I say this tongue in cheek, whether we want to be or not, but it really forces that kind of, and if we start this literally from day one when we're with groups of people, and someone had said that to me on Thursday, said, well, Heather, these are things that have to start from the start of the year. And I said, yeah, I agree with you that should happen. So we're creating that really safe and always moving, keep the kids moving kind of thing, on their toes, environment from day one. I have been in hundreds of schools where I'm a guest in the school, and I will do this right from the day. And if kids understand that I know we have 26 people, and if we have 26 people, I know we have 13 pairs, and that 13 pairs means everybody in this room is going to have a partner. If I have 27, I know there's going to be one group of 3. So as soon as I've done it the first time, I'm very aware of that. I wouldn't do these every class, but I would do that and say, okay, so now I know for when I say teams, and then we're putting the ownership back on. And again, I think if we do it from an early age more often, this is putting those kids in those social contexts of that domain, and then that whole thing. So where I'm going back is, okay, so now everybody will have a partner, and you can't be with the same person you've just been with, but I know that the numbers are even. So there's no reason why everybody won't have a partner. So, and if they're doing it, then I'll also do things like after they're moving around, then I'll say, okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And by that point, okay, they're with somebody. So, and it just, I said, it puts some people out of their comfort zone. And obviously we have a lot of our students nowadays who are, have a hard time regulating. So for some of those things, but just to be aware of it for the most part, especially the whole inclusion part of not us speaking, well, I'm going to be with my best friend, or I don't want to be with Kathy, and I don't want to be with Nicole, who's standing right beside me, or I've been with, etc. So it helps break a lot of that stuff down. And it's just, these were the things that we were doing that teacher had sent me the email about on Sunday night, just to say thank you. So I never thought about this. And I've been there, done that, where I taught junior high girls for many a year, where, and I don't mean to give a bad rap to junior high girls, because I have one of them, and one's already now high school girl. But there, I have had classes where it's been predominantly this culture of, no, we don't want them with us, and I've let that happen subconsciously. I should have done it differently. And now that I do know that, I am very aware of it. Let's just say. Okay, so this is the last piece here, and I want to leave time for some questions. So this is what I said. These are all active links except for ever active. For some reason, it just keeps going to a broken link. But if you're to go on all of these, what I love about them, again, is they're Canadian. But this is the how, this is the where, and this is the people that can help you. HPEC says regional reps or people like me. My email is on the front page and the back page. By any means, I love, hope that you've kind of caught that energy, helping people with this, living this, breathing this, making it come more to life. So it's not just, we can say it because it is a concept, but how do we actually live it? So PHE Canada, again, has lots of amazing, all of these have lots of amazing free resources. If you've never checked out thephysicaleducator.com, as a friend of mine, Joey Fife out of Quebec, he does a great job of all his activities. He calls them builds, where we scaffold in. So he'll have a game with 3 builds or 6 builds, and you start at one level and you build in, build in, build in. And what that does is really helps us. So some people who've been doing it for a long time, or maybe at a secondary level, will go right to build 5. They're like, yeah, I got this, and will introduce their students. Great. But if we want to talk about inclusion and ways that we can bring kids in, or younger kids when we're starting off at that very, very I say elementary level, at that rudimentary level, then he builds on like from there. So great thing. So I'll leave it at that. And so they're all live links. You can go to there anytime. The bottom here, again, this pre-conference session is the whole handout of what I just showed you, with the switch activity and that whole thing with linking the outcomes with the Pew and the ABCDs of movement. Okay, we have more time than we did yesterday, ladies. 8 minutes. Hit me.
Oh, that's great, Heather. Does anyone have any questions for Heather?
I can keep going, but I talked a little even faster this morning, but I wanted to have time for questions.
I have a question for you, Heather.
Okay, hit me, Kathy.
You mentioned that you had done a presentation on Thursday on how physical literacy fits in with mental health, or supports mental health. Can you give us 1 or 2 examples of maybe perhaps some things that you did with that group that promoted mental health for students?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So is it okay if I stop sharing, just as I can see bigger? I just have to go back over here. Oops. Oh, you already took me off there to stop sharing, right? Let me get out of here. Perfect. Okay, is it good?
We still have you sharing.
Oh, why?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either. Oh,
Maybe.
There we go.
Ah, there you go.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm going to pull you back over here so I can actually be looking at people. Is that good? You still see me?
Yeah, we can see you.
Perfect. Okay, so great question. So basically, so when you see the activities that are in there, what we did with each one of them, when I say we, my co-chair for HPEC conference, Colette Tercier, who is now had her baby 2 days after our conference. She held it together, literally, quite literally, and then had the baby on Monday. So we put this handout in this session together, and the whole idea behind, again, calling it intentional, to answer your question, Kathy, is that when you take a game, something like I said, the reason I picked the ones that are in there, Switch is in there, Foursquare is in there. There's a game called Moonball in there, which is a variation of a volleyball game with no net, and you use hula hoops instead. There's some passing games in there, and the whole idea behind them, they were intentionally chosen for this handout for this session, because within every one of them, how we set the kids up, the students up, the people up, the whatever, if I'm facilitating with adults, it would be based on keeping in mind, and I know mental health is a broad one, we wanted to have a catchy title, but it's all of this. So even how we pick the groups that we just did with that really simple activity that I told you about, that is intentional. So when I have a group of students and I want them to get together with a partner, and I don't want, again, to spend a million, so I love / don't love, but I love when the kids have the aha, when they pick team captains at recess time, or let's say in a I would never let it happen in a phys ed class, but at recess time, and they come in, oh, our recess sucked. This is my grade 4s. I will never forget them. Grade 4 is all about fairness and it took the whole time to pick teams. Like, oh, okay, because they had captains and so. Like Nicole took forever. She wouldn't make her pick, and then then Kathy did this and this, and so the whole point that I'm trying to make there is that, and that's really not inclusive. And if any of you on the call, myself included, have ever been chosen last, you know what that feeling's like. And so that is all about, when I say mental health, that is a big piece of that. So the more we can do activities that do something as simple as picking a team, a partner, a group, without them, you're still giving them choice, or you're still giving them a piece of that because of what they're wearing, for example, or people with glasses, or let's say with braces, or really trying to celebrate those things instead of making those differences stick out, because they already feel, I'll say, we know kids. I have a son who's 18 with anxiety and acne. And so he thinks that his skin is horrible. And of course, Mama Bear, like, no, it's not. And it's not that bad. But for him, his perception is his reality. And that does impact his mental health. So if we can find ways to make it so that it's less disarming, and putting the kids all on that same playing field for something that's just right off the hop, if we can't pick teams without it being a big deal, because they're going to feel mentally, if their mental health when they walk in a gym is they know if there's teams being picked today, I'm going to be the last kid, that impacts them 100% when they walk in the door. Something, I'm going to say this, like, right, and I've been there, done that. When I first started my career, the very first thing that a lot of our junior highs, I will say, even some of our high schools, but junior highs for sure, the very first thing that we start with in September is running, because cross-country running is going to be an event that happens in September. Well, what about the kids who cannot run, or who physically dislike running? I'm a runner. My husband is not. I like running. But just because I like running and I'm the teacher doesn't mean that everyone in my class is going to be. However, could we do a walk run program? Could we walk or run a little bit? And then when they get back, could they play another activity? Like, do we have to run for 50 minutes of a class for 3 weeks in September? Because all we have done then is successfully turned off every student who is not a runner from phys ed and junior high. And we're in September, and we've got them for the rest of the year. And we wonder why they're hiding in change rooms, why they're not coming to class, why they're presenting behavioral problems that now I get as an assistant principal, because they can't run. They physically have never been taught how to, or whatever the case may be. Phys ed, much like our art, much like our music, etc., we put kids out there, they perform. It's very different than seeing in a class when I've got a book in front of me and I'm struggling to read this book. None of you know that I have dyslexia. None of you know that I'm having a really hard time with these words because of my English as a second language. None of you know that, or I mean, what I mean by, you know what I mean by, I don't know that. I'm struggling with this. Whereas in phys ed, if I put a skipping rope in your hand and say, okay, everybody in this class has to skip with a skipping rope, you can see that. And of course that heightens kids' mental health, as far as if they're not confident with it, if they've never been taught how to. I can't tell you how many classrooms I walked into where, should kids be able to jump rope by grade 4? Yeah, they should. But if they've never been taught, I'm not looking to blame, we got to teach them. I get kids in high school that can't skip. Like, whoa, what just happened there? Like, fundamentally, you should know how to skip. But if they can't, that's our job to teach them. And if they can't skip, some kids will make a joke about it and be like, okay, and look at this. And some will be like, I'm not doing this. So does that kind of answer your question, Kathy? Like, we just need to be more mindful that just because we've been doing things a certain way for a long time, Doesn't mean it's a way, doesn't mean it's the way, and it certainly doesn't mean it's the right way, to make sure that we truly are encouraging, including kids, so it's meaningful for them, it's challenging for them, and it's varied for them.